The first clue that my husband was living a second life was not lipstick, perfume, or a late-night text. It was a little girl calling him Dad in a parking lot 40 miles from our house. 3 weeks later, I found a hidden divorce plan with my name on it. Detailed calculations for how much money he could leave with, and notes about the lake house my mother left me after she died. The terrifying part was not that Nathan Mercer had another family. It was how calmly he came home every night afterward, kissed my cheek, asked about groceries, and slept beside me like he had not already destroyed our entire life. My name is Claire Mercer. I was 47 years old when I realized my marriage had not been falling apart. It had been replaced. Most people would have said I had a good life. Not exciting, not passionate, but stable. At 48, I had learned that most marriages in our neighborhood ran less on romance and more on routine. You paid the mortgage. You waved at the neighbors. You hosted people for football season. You remembered birthdays. You sat next to each other on the couch while watching television and called that closeness. That was enough for most people. For years, I told myself it was enough for me too. We lived in a quiet suburb outside Raleigh, North Carolina, in one of those developments where every mailbox looked the same and every backyard had some variation of patio furniture and string lights. On Saturday mornings, people walked their dogs before 8. On Sundays, lawnmowers started before church. Our lives moved in loops. Costco runs on weekends. HOA emails nobody wanted to read. Church brunches after service. Charity cookouts during summer. Smiling at neighbors while carrying grocery bags from the SUV. From the outside, my husband looked like the kind of man women trusted instantly. Nathan Mercer was 52. Tall, calm, successful without being flashy. He worked as regional operations director for a transportation company called Blue Ridge Freight Logistics. He wore pressed button-downs even on weekends and somehow remembered everybody's names at community events. People loved him. The women in our neighborhood called him dependable. The men respected him because he listened more than he talked. Whenever someone needed help moving furniture or fixing a sprinkler system, Nathan showed up first. I used to feel proud watching people admire him. Toward the end, I mostly felt tired. Not because he was cruel. That would have been easier. Cruel men leave bruises you can point to. Nathan left absences. Tiny empty spaces that slowly spread through our marriage like cracks under paint. At first, I ignored them. He still kissed my forehead before leaving for work. He still asked if we needed anything from the grocery store. He still sat beside me at neighborhood barbecues with one hand resting lightly against my back. At night, he still told me to sleep well. But somewhere over the years, he stopped really seeing me. I noticed it in small moments. I would tell him about a client redesign project and realize halfway through that he was scrolling through emails while nodding. He stopped asking follow-up questions, stopped reaching for me in bed, stopped laughing the way he used to. Sometimes we would sit in the same room for hours without speaking. The television filling the silence neither of us wanted to acknowledge. I told myself that was normal. Middle-aged marriages cooled down. Everybody knew that. People got tired. Careers got stressful. Bodies changed. Life became practical. At least that was what I repeated in my head every time something felt wrong. Nathan started taking his phone everywhere. Bathroom, garage, backyard. If I picked it up accidentally while cleaning the kitchen counter, he reached for it too quickly. One night, I noticed he had changed the password. I remember standing there, holding my own coffee mug, while trying to convince myself it meant nothing. Maybe his company updated security policies. Maybe I was becoming paranoid. Maybe women my age started inventing problems because they were afraid of becoming invisible. That thought stayed with me longer than I wanted to admit. The gaslighting did not begin dramatically. It never does. It came wrapped in concern. You have been anxious lately. You read too much into things. Not everything is a crisis. Claire. That last sentence stayed in my head for days after he said it, because part of me wondered if he was right. My older sister, Vanessa, certainly did not think so. Vanessa had gone through a vicious divorce almost 10 years earlier, after discovering her husband had another relationship for nearly 3 years. Since then, she distrusted men who appeared too polished. After a family brunch one Sunday, she called me while I was unloading leftovers into the refrigerator. "There is something about Nathan that feels rehearsed," she said quietly. I laughed immediately because I hated how defensive I sounded. "You are projecting." "Maybe," she admitted, "but some people spend years learning how to look trustworthy." I ended the call irritated, not because I thought she was wrong, because a small part of me was afraid she might not be. After that conversation, I started noticing more things. At a neighborhood cookout hosted by Denise Holloway, Nathan disappeared for nearly 20 minutes during dinner. When I finally spotted him, he was sitting alone inside his truck with the windows rolled up, talking on the phone. When he came back, I asked who called. "Freight issue in Atlanta." He answered too quickly. Then he kissed the top of my head and handed me another drink like nothing had happened. Another night. His phone lit up after midnight. He grabbed it before I could even glance toward the screen. "Freight emergency." He muttered again. Everything became a freight emergency eventually. One Tuesday afternoon, I was organizing paperwork in our home office when Nathan suddenly came home almost 2 hours early. The sound of the garage door startled me so badly I dropped a folder. When he walked into the room and saw me near his desk, something flashed across his face for barely a second. Not guilt, fear. Then it disappeared. "Traffic was terrible," he said calmly. I remember realizing in that moment how controlled he always was. That frightened me more than anger would have. Around that time, I stopped sleeping well. I would lie awake listening to the hum of the refrigerator downstairs. Sometimes I heard the garage door open late at night and wondered where he had gone. Other nights, I watched the glow of his phone screen reflect faintly against the bedroom ceiling while he thought I was asleep. Still, every morning he behaved normally enough to make me feel ashamed for doubting him. The night before his trip to Phoenix was the worst. He acted almost tender. He asked about my mother's blood pressure medication, helped clear dinner plates without being asked, sat beside me on the couch while an old crime show played softly in the background. I remember thinking maybe I was ruining my own marriage with suspicion. Maybe nothing was wrong. 2 days later, while helping Denise prepare decorations for a neighborhood charity fundraiser, I overheard Cheryl Dawson mention seeing Nathan and Carrie with a brunette woman and a little girl. They looked like a family, Cheryl said casually while arranging centerpieces. My entire body went cold for half a second. Then I immediately rejected it. Wrong person. It had to be. Nathan flew to Phoenix that evening. After dinner, I went down into the garage searching for replacement light bulbs for the storage room. Most of the shelves were cluttered with old paint cans, extension cords, Christmas decorations we never used anymore. Near the back corner sat a dusty plastic bin I did not recognize. Inside was a key attached to an apartment tag, a grocery receipt from Carrie, a receipt for children's winter clothes, and a Polaroid photograph. I stared at it for so long, my vision blurred. Nathan stood in front of a Christmas tree with his arm wrapped around a little girl around 6 years old. He was smiling openly, warmly, like a man completely at ease in his own life. On the back, written in messy purple marker, were 4 words. To Daddy Nate, love, Ivy. I did not cry. I just sat down slowly on the cold garage floor while the air conditioner hummed somewhere inside the house above me. And for the first time in years, I realized the most terrifying part was not that my husband might be lying to me. It was that I no longer had any idea who he actually was. I stayed on that garage floor until my legs went numb. At some point, the air conditioner shut off, and the silence became so heavy I could hear my own breathing echo against the concrete walls. I kept turning the Polaroid over in my hands like it might change if I stared long enough. Like another explanation might suddenly appear. Anise, a coworker's child. Some strange misunderstanding. But nobody writes Daddy on the back of a photo by accident. When Nathan called later that night from Phoenix, I answered anyway. You still up? Claire. His voice sounded warm, familiar, careless. Yeah? I lied softly. Just watching TV. You should get some sleep. I almost laughed at how normal he sounded. How was your flight? I asked. Delayed. You know how Charlotte connections are. I closed my eyes. The terrifying part was not that he lied smoothly. It was that he sounded completely relaxed doing it. The next morning, I slid the photo back into the plastic bin before he came home. I did not confront him. Not yet. Some instinct deep inside me knew that if I reacted too quickly, everything would disappear. The receipts, the evidence, the truth. So instead, I started watching quietly. I began keeping notes in a grocery list app Nathan never checked. Dates of business trips, hotel charges, toll road payments, reimbursements from Blue Ridge Freight. Patterns started appearing faster than I expected. Charges in Carrie almost every other week. School-related payments under unfamiliar names. Restaurant receipts during weekends. Nathan supposedly spent at logistics conferences. I sat at the kitchen counter for hours one afternoon, staring at a bank statement while cold coffee turned bitter beside me. How long had this been happening? Who else knew? How many holidays had I spent alone while he played husband somewhere else? The questions became endless. 3 days later, I almost got caught. Nathan was supposed to be in Greensboro meeting with clients. I was in the home office checking browser history on his desktop when I suddenly heard the garage door opening downstairs. My entire body locked. Footsteps moved through the kitchen. Then the office doorway darkened. Nathan stood there calmly, one hand still holding his car keys. For one horrible second, neither of us spoke. "What are you doing?" he finally asked. I forced myself to breathe. Looking for the printer password? Mine disconnected again. He stared at the computer screen for a moment too long. Then he smiled. "You should really replace that laptop downstairs." It barely works anymore. No anger, no panic. That was what unsettled me most. A guilty person should have looked nervous. Nathan only looked observant. He walked past me to grab his work laptop from the desk drawer. His shoulder brushed lightly against mine. "You okay?" "Claire." I nodded too quickly. "Just tired. You have seemed distracted lately." There it was again. That calm voice, that gentle concern designed to make me question myself instead of him. That evening, he cooked dinner. Actually cooked steak, roasted potatoes, opened a bottle of wine we had been saving since Christmas. For almost an hour, I hated myself for suspecting him. He asked about Vanessa, talked about replacing the deck next spring, reached for my hand while we watched television. I remember thinking maybe grief and middle age had simply made me paranoid. Then he went upstairs to shower. While carrying his gym bag toward the laundry room, I felt a vibration inside one of the side pockets. A second phone. Not his regular phone. Smaller. Black case. No notifications visible on the lock screen. I slid it back exactly where I found it before he came downstairs. That was the moment denial finally died. 2 mornings later, after Nathan left for work, I drove to Carrie using the apartment address from the receipt. The complex sat near a shopping center with a nail salon and a small coffee shop. Nothing suspicious. Nothing dramatic. I parked across the street and stayed there almost 40 minutes. A little pink bicycle leaned against the stair railing outside the building. Amazon boxes sat near one of the doors. Old Christmas lights still hung crookedly along a balcony, even though it was already March. Outside one apartment sat 3 pairs of shoes together. Large sneakers, women's sandals, tiny glitter sneakers with cartoon stars. That hurt more than I expected. Not because it looked secretive, because it looked real. This was not some cheap motel affair. Someone lived there. Someone built routines there. Eventually, the apartment door opened. Nathan stepped outside, carrying a little girl in his arms. She could not have been older than 6. Dark curls, purple jacket, tiny backpack bouncing against her shoulders. And Nathan was smiling, not politely, not the careful social smile he used around neighbors. This smile reached his eyes. The little girl wriggled down, laughing. "Dad, wait." I physically stopped breathing. Nathan crouched to zip her jacket while she talked excitedly about something I could not hear. For a second, they looked painfully ordinary. A father taking his daughter to school. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my fingers cramped. When they drove away, I stayed frozen in the parking lot, listening to static from a nearby radio drifting through an open truck window. I could not even twist open my water bottle. The next morning I went back. I do not know what I expected. A cruel woman, maybe. Someone glamorous and cold. Someone easy to hate. Instead, the woman who opened the apartment door looked exhausted and kind. She was probably around 40. Soft brown hair pulled into a loose bun. Sweatpants. Oversized university sweatshirt. She smiled politely at first. "Can I help you?" My throat almost closed. "Are you Noelle?" Her expression changed slightly. "Yes." I held onto the strap of my purse to stop my hands from shaking. "I think we need to talk about Nathan Mercer." Silence filled the doorway instantly. For a second, she just stared at me. Then she stepped aside slowly. The apartment smelled faintly like cinnamon candles and laundry detergent. Family photos covered the shelves. Disney pictures. school art projects, a calendar filled with elementary school events. Christmas stockings still sat folded inside a decorative basket near the fireplace. The entire place radiated normal family life. I suddenly understood why Nathan had been able to live like this for so long. Because he never saw it as cheating. He saw it as maintaining two separate realities. Noelle sat across from me at the kitchen table, looking confused more than defensive. Nathan said your divorce was almost finalized, she said quietly. I felt something crack open inside my chest. What divorce? She frowned immediately. He told me you two had been separated for years. I stared at her. Noelle kept talking slowly now, almost like she was realizing things while speaking. He said the marriage ended emotionally a long time ago. That you stayed together because of finances and appearances. My hands started trembling again. Last month, Nathan and I celebrated our 23rd anniversary. I said softly. Color drained from her face. Noelle looked toward the hallway like she expected him to walk in and explain everything. Instead, she whispered one sentence that made everything even worse. He always disappeared during Thanksgiving and Christmas because he said he had obligations with his ex-wife. Ex-wife, I opened my phone and showed her pictures from our anniversary dinner in January. Then family photos from church events. Recent tax documents with both our names. The silence afterward felt unbearable. Noelle covered her mouth with one hand. Oh my God! Neither of us cried right away. We just sat there inside the wreckage Nathan had carefully built around both of us. Two women living inside completely different versions of the same lie. When I finally left the apartment, the sun was already setting. Driving home, every holiday memory replayed differently in my head. Business trips, emergency meetings, client dinners. Every missing weekend suddenly had a location, a second life, another family waiting for him somewhere else. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the kitchen lights inside my house had turned on automatically. I sat in the car staring at them through the windshield for a long time. And somewhere between the shock and the exhaustion, I realized the worst part was not that Nathan loved someone else. It was that he had spent years convincing me our marriage was still real while secretly building another one beside it. After that night, I stopped looking at Nathan like my husband. He became someone I studied, someone I measured carefully from across kitchen counters and quiet hallways. I no longer searched for signs that he loved me. I searched for proof. The strange thing about betrayal is how quickly grief turns practical once survival enters the room. I started paying attention to everything. Retirement accounts, tax returns, mortgage statements, credit reports. Things I had ignored for years because I trusted him to handle them. Now every document felt dangerous. Nathan still moved through the house like nothing had changed. He kissed my cheek before work, asked whether we needed milk, complained about traffic. Meanwhile, I sat at the dining room table after he left each morning, slowly uncovering pieces of another life. The first thing I found was a hidden credit line. Not massive, just enough to avoid immediate suspicion. Then came the transfers. Small amounts every month dating back almost 4 years. Apartment payments, utility bills, school tuition deposits, children's medical expenses. Each discovery tightened something inside my chest. One afternoon, I found notes from a consultation with a financial advisor in Charlotte discussing asset protection strategies before divorce proceedings. My hands went cold reading the phrases. property exposure, retirement shielding, projected spousal obligations. There were even handwritten notes mentioning my mother's lake property in Asheville, the cabin she left me after Dad died. Nathan had highlighted inheritance timing questions. I sat there staring at the page for nearly 10 minutes before realizing I had stopped breathing normally. This was not a man trapped in confusion. This was a man preparing an exit, a careful one. 3 days later, my phone rang while I was folding laundry. Hello. This is Rebecca Chen with First Carolina Bank. I am calling to verify a recent refinancing inquiry connected to your marital lending profile. I froze immediately. What refinancing inquiry? There was a short pause. Mrs. Mercer, are you saying you are unaware of the request submitted last month? I gripped the kitchen counter. What request? Rebecca's voice softened carefully. A preliminary home equity restructuring review tied to your joint assets. Joint assets. My vision blurred for a second. Nathan had not just been cheating on me. He had been organizing his financial future while still sleeping beside me every night. When the call ended, I sat down on the floor beside the laundry basket because my legs suddenly felt too weak to hold me. That evening, I parked outside a Harris Teeter grocery store and stayed there almost an hour. Rain slid slowly down the windshield, while people carried shopping bags through the parking lot around me. Normal people living normal lives. Meanwhile, mascara burned under my eyes because I could not stop crying long enough to fix it. At one point, I picked up my phone to call Nathan. My thumb hovered over his name. Then I imagined hearing his calm voice again. That controlled tone, that gentle concern, and suddenly I could not breathe. My chest tightened so sharply, I thought I might actually pass out. I dropped the phone onto the passenger seat and bent forward, trying to inhale. The panic attack lasted maybe 5 minutes. It felt like dying quietly. I never went inside the grocery store. When I finally drove home, Vanessa was already waiting in my driveway. She stepped toward the car before I even turned the engine off. Claire? The second she saw my face, her expression changed completely. Oh God, what happened? Inside the kitchen, I told her everything. The apartment, the little girl, the second phone, the financial records. Vanessa listened without interrupting, both hands wrapped around a mug of untouched tea. When I finished, she stared down at the table for a long moment. Then she said something I did not expect. You know what the worst part is. I shook my head. You still sound guilty for discovering it. That sentence hit harder than almost everything else. Because she was right. Even now, some part of me still worried I was overreacting. Vanessa leaned back in her chair slowly. Mom did the same thing, she said quietly. I knew exactly what she meant. Our father cheated for years before leaving. By the time Mom found out, most of the money was already gone. Retirement accounts drained. Debt hidden under joint statements she never checked. She spent the rest of her life apologizing for not seeing it sooner. I used to promise myself I would never become that woman. Yet somehow, I had spent 20 years trying to be agreeable enough to keep a marriage alive. Do you know how many times Mom said she did not want to make trouble? Vanessa asked. I stared down at my wedding ring. I think I became her anyway. No, Vanessa said immediately. You became someone trying to survive. That conversation changed something inside me. For the first time since discovering the truth, I stopped thinking about saving the marriage. I started thinking about saving myself. The next morning, Vanessa drove with me to meet an attorney named Camille Bennett. Camille worked in a quiet office building outside downtown Raleigh. Mid-40s. Sharp navy blazer. No fake sympathy. She did not promise revenge. She promised clarity. After listening carefully to my situation, she folded her hands together calmly. "People like your husband do not improvise betrayal," she said. "They organize it." I felt my stomach twist. Camille explained everything carefully. Separate property law, asset tracing, retirement division, forensic accounting, potential alimony exposure. What documents I needed immediately, what not to say to Nathan yet, what accounts to protect first. At one point, I asked the question I had secretly feared most. Do men like this usually leave? Camille looked directly at me. Men like this usually leave only when they believe the numbers favor them. The drive home felt strangely quiet after that. Not peaceful. Focused. That night, I started building files. At 2 a.m, I sat inside the home office scanning tax returns while the rest of the house slept. I backed up emails, took screenshots, photographed refinance documents, created a timeline of every suspicious trip since 2020, opened a separate checking account under my name only. The fear inside me slowly started changing shape. It became colder, more controlled. Meanwhile, cracks were beginning to appear elsewhere too. Grant Holloway pulled me aside after church one Sunday. "Nathan has been manipulating travel schedules for years," he admitted carefully. "A few people at Blue Ridge noticed unusual reimbursements, but nobody wanted to question him directly. A week later, Noelle called me late at night. Her voice sounded hollow. 'He never lets me come to work events,' she whispered. 'He said it would complicate things with the divorce.' I closed my eyes. 'There is no divorce,' I told her softly. Silence filled the line. Then she started crying. Around 1:30 one morning, while I was backing files onto a flash drive in the home office, I suddenly sensed movement behind me. I turned so fast my chair nearly hit the wall. Nathan stood in the hallway doorway, wearing gray sweatpants, one hand resting against the frame. For a terrifying second, neither of us spoke. "You are still awake?" he asked quietly. I forced myself to minimize the folder on the screen. Could not sleep. He looked at me carefully, long enough that I thought he knew everything. Then he nodded once. "Do not stay up too late." After he walked away, my entire body shook so violently I had to grip the edge of the desk. The next afternoon, I found the file, buried inside a folder labeled Tax Projections, Projected Divorce Outcomes, 2026. I opened it slowly. Estimated asset division, refinance timelines, projected support obligations, inheritance exposure notes tied to my mother's property, and finally a document labeled Exit Strategy Sequence. I stared at those words until they stopped looking real. Nathan had never been torn between two lives. He had simply been waiting for the version that cost him less. That night, I sat alone in the dark kitchen with the divorce file spread across the table while the refrigerator hummed softly behind me. And for the first time since all of this began, the pain inside me stopped feeling helpless. It started feeling sharp. Something inside me had finally stopped begging to be spared. Nathan came home from Nashville on a rainy Thursday evening, carrying the same black overnight bag he had used for years. I heard the garage door open while I stood at the kitchen sink rinsing a coffee mug. For a few seconds, I simply watched his reflection move across the dark window above the sink. Then he walked in like every other husband returning from every other business trip. He dropped his keys onto the counter. You would not believe the traffic near Durham tonight. He loosened his tie, kissed my cheek lightly, then opened the refrigerator. Do we need anything from the store tomorrow? I stared at him for a second too long. What? Nothing, I said quietly. That was the moment I finally understood something terrifying about liars. They could destroy you completely and still ask about grocery lists afterward. Nathan poured himself water and started talking about weather delays at the airport, while I watched his mouth move from across the kitchen island. Every movement looked practiced now, controlled, measured, as if he had spent years rehearsing normally. That night, I waited until after dinner, until after the dishwasher started running, until after the neighborhood outside turned quiet. Then I placed everything across the kitchen table one piece at a time. The Polaroid, the apartment lease, the hidden phone, bank transfers, refinancing documents, printed screenshots, retirement statements, the divorce projection file. The burner phone sat near the center of the table, like something toxic. Nathan walked into the kitchen carrying a beer from the garage fridge. He stopped immediately. Silence stretched between us while the dishwasher hummed softly in the background. For several seconds, he said nothing at all. Then he placed the beer down very carefully. Claire. I folded my arms tightly across my chest because I could feel my hands shaking. Who is Ivy? His expression barely changed. That frightened me more than panic would have. You went through my things. I waited. Nathan exhaled slowly and sat down across from me. This is not what you think. I almost laughed. Then tell me what I am supposed to think. He rubbed one hand across his jaw. Noelle is a complicated situation. Complicated? The word landed like acid inside me. I slid the apartment lease toward him. You rented an apartment for another family. He looked down at the papers briefly. It was never supposed to happen like this. There it was. Not denial. Minimizing. As if the problem was logistics instead of betrayal. Things got out of control, he said quietly. I stared at him across the table. Out of control for 6 years. Nathan leaned back in his chair and, for the first time, irritation flickered across his face. You have not exactly been happy either. Claire, I felt something inside me go still. There it is. His eyes narrowed slightly. There what is the part where you try to make this my fault. Nathan stood up suddenly and walked toward the sink. You checked my accounts, my emails, my records. Do you understand how invasive that is? I almost could not believe what I was hearing. You built another life while I kept trying to save this one. He turned around sharply. Save what? We have been pretending for years. That sentence should have shattered me. Instead, it only made me tired. You do not get to rewrite our marriage because you got caught. For a second, neither of us spoke. Rain tapped softly against the kitchen windows. Nathan looked older suddenly. Not guilty. Cornered. I never meant to hurt you, he said finally. I looked down at the Polaroid sitting between us. Then why does she call you Dad? He closed his eyes briefly. When he spoke again, his voice sounded smaller. I care about both of you. That almost worked. God help me. For one terrible moment, it almost worked. Because there was something exhausted in his face that reminded me of the man I married 23 years earlier. Then his eyes shifted. Not toward me, toward the stack of legal papers beside my elbow. And instantly I understood. He was not afraid of losing me. He was afraid of consequences. I reached into the folder and pulled out Camille Bennett's filing confirmation. The color drained slowly from Nathan's face as he read. "You filed already?" "Yes." His jaw tightened. "You talked to a lawyer before talking to me." I gave a short laugh that did not sound like mine anymore. "You planned your exit before I even knew there was another life to exit from." He grabbed the refinance document suddenly. "Claire, listen to me." I pulled them back immediately. "Do not touch those." Something changed in his expression right then. Not anger, recognition. He realized I was no longer frightened of him. At the same time, somewhere across town, Noelle had apparently reached her own breaking point. My phone buzzed against the table. Nathan glanced at the screen and immediately went pale. "Noelle." I answered without looking away from him. Her voice sounded wrecked. I checked public records. Nathan closed his eyes. "You are still legally married." Silence. Then Noelle spoke again, quieter this time. "He told me the exact same stories about you that he told you about me. Did he not?" I swallowed hard. "Yes." Nathan walked toward the back door and pressed one hand against his forehead. Noelle started crying softly through the phone. "He said you stopped loving him years ago." Nathan finally snapped. "Please stop doing this over the phone." I looked at him coldly. "Doing what?" "Comparing notes." The next week, his life started cracking open in small, humiliating ways. Denise Holloway heard rumors through someone whose husband worked at Blue Ridge Logistics. Church brunches became awkward. People stopped making eye contact as long. Conversations paused when Nathan walked into rooms. Grant Holloway was questioned by Human Resources regarding suspicious travel reimbursements tied to Nathan's department. One Friday evening, Nathan came home furious after being quietly removed from a major expansion project. "This is unbelievable," he muttered while throwing his keys onto the counter. I said nothing. He looked at me sharply. "Did you tell people?" No. That answer was true. I had not needed to. Truth traveled on its own. 3 nights later, Nathan finally started packing. Not dramatically. No screaming, no broken dishes. He folded clothes into a suitcase while the television murmured softly downstairs. At one point, he stopped in the bedroom doorway, holding an old framed photo from our anniversary trip to Charleston. "I never stopped caring about you," he said quietly. I looked at him for a long moment, then at the suitcase near his feet, then at the wedding photo still hanging on the wall behind him. Caring about someone is not the same as protecting them. He looked away first. Close to midnight, I stood alone in the dark kitchen while Nathan rolled his suitcase through the garage. The headlights from his car swept briefly across the walls before disappearing down the driveway. I waited for myself to feel victorious. Instead, I only felt exhausted. Like I had spent years sharing a home with someone whose real life had always existed, just slightly out of reach. The silence after Nathan left felt unfamiliar at first. Not peaceful, just empty. For weeks, I still caught myself listening for the garage door at 6:30. Still expected to hear his keys hit the kitchen counter. Still glanced up whenever headlights crossed the front windows at night. 23 years of routine does not disappear cleanly. It leaves echoes behind. Nathan moved into a small apartment owned by an old college friend outside Greensboro. Vanessa heard about it first through church gossip. Though nobody said his name directly anymore. That was how humiliation worked in suburban communities. Quietly, people stopped inviting him to neighborhood cookouts. Men he had known for years suddenly became too busy for golf weekends. Couples avoided eye contact at Sunday brunch after church. Nobody made scenes. They simply stepped back. Apparently, the apartment had one bedroom and a pull-out couch that hurt his back. He started eating frozen dinners because he never learned how to cook more than eggs and grilled chicken. For years, I had organized everything around him without even realizing it. Appointments, birthdays, holiday planning, bills, laundry. The invisible labor wives perform until their absence becomes impossible to ignore. I did not hear most of this from Nathan himself. I heard it from the strange network of suburban information that moves faster than people realize. Coworkers talked, neighbors noticed, church women exchanged careful looks over coffee. At Blue Ridge Logistics, the human resources audit expanded quietly over several months. Expense reports were reviewed. Unauthorized reimbursements surfaced. Questions about manipulated travel schedules became harder to ignore. Nathan lost oversight of a major regional contract by early fall. By Christmas, people at the company had stopped treating him like leadership and started treating him like risk. That kind of downfall never happens all at once. It happens through silence. Meetings you are no longer invited into. Calls that stop coming. Conversations that end when you enter a room. Meanwhile, Noelle made her own decision. She left. Not dramatically. Not vindictively. One afternoon, she called me while Ivy was apparently at school. "I cannot do this anymore," she said quietly. Her voice sounded older than before. I sat on the back patio, listening while cold wind moved through the trees behind the house. He kept promising he would fix everything. She continued. But every version of his life depends on someone else carrying the damage for him. I closed my eyes. For the first time since all of this started, I no longer hated her. In another version of life, we probably would have been friends. "What are you going to do?" I asked softly. "Take care of my daughter." Simple. Clear. Healthier than anything Nathan had done in years. After the divorce proceedings officially began, I started changing the house slowly. Not because some dramatic transformation fixed heartbreak, but because survival often looks ordinary. I boxed up Nathan's clothes first, then the golf equipment in the garage, then the drawer full of tangled charging cables and random receipts he always claimed he needed. One Saturday morning, I repainted the bedroom walls pale gray because I could not stand looking at the old color anymore. I opened windows that had stayed shut for years. I reorganized the kitchen cabinets exactly the way I wanted them instead of around his preferences. The hardest part was the garage. For months, I avoided the exact corner where I had found the Polaroid. Eventually, I cleaned it anyway, threw out broken storage bins, swept dust from the concrete, installed brighter lighting. It felt less like erasing him and more like reclaiming space where I had once collapsed. In late October, Vanessa convinced me to visit our mother in Asheville. Mom had grown smaller over the years, softer somehow. Age had worn down the sharp edges grief once left behind. We sat together on her screened porch, drinking coffee while rain rolled through the mountains. At some point, I finally admitted the truth I had carried most of my adult life. I spent years trying not to become you. Mom looked at me carefully. "Meaning what?" meaning the woman Dad left behind. The woman who lost everything because she stayed too quiet too long. She looked down into her coffee cup for a moment. Then she said something that settled deep inside me. Keeping peace and keeping a marriage are not always the same thing. I felt tears sting my eyes instantly. Because for years I thought silence was maturity, patience, strength. But sometimes silence is just fear wearing good manners. That conversation healed something in me I did not realize was still broken. Months passed. Winter came. Then spring again. The divorce finalized quietly on a Thursday morning without courtroom drama or cinematic speeches. Just signatures. Paperwork. Numbers. The ending of a marriage reduced to administrative language. One night in April, nearly 11 months after Nathan left, my phone buzzed close to midnight. I stared at his name for a long moment before letting it go to voicemail. The next morning, I played the message while making coffee. His voice sounded tired, older. I thought I could keep both lives without losing either. Silence followed for several seconds. Then he exhaled softly. I do not even know why I'm calling anymore. The message ended there. No apology. No real accountability. Just loneliness finally reaching him after everyone else stopped cushioning the consequences. I deleted the voicemail without replaying it. Then I opened the kitchen window above the sink. Cool spring air drifted inside, carrying the smell of fresh rain and cut grass from somewhere down the street. The house felt different now. Not happier every second. Not magically healed, but safe. There were no more late-night phone checks. No more waiting for garage doors. No more wondering whether every business trip hid another lie. Just morning light across clean countertops. The sound of coffee brewing. Wind moving through open windows. For years, I thought losing my marriage would destroy me. Instead, I slowly realized I had been disappearing inside it long before it ended. And maybe that is the real danger of loving someone who keeps asking you to ignore your own instincts. You lose your reflection, trying to protect their illusion. If you have ever ignored red flags because you were afraid of what the truth might cost, or stayed too quiet just to keep peace inside a relationship, I hope you remember this. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop shrinking yourself to keep someone else comfortable. And if this story stayed with you, let me know where you would have walked away. And whether you think people like Nathan ever truly regret what they destroy.